So I was really tired, and I skipped coffee. I always need coffee. As I blew through the first light, it was yellow. The second one I looked up was red, but I didn't understand why a car was coming so fast. It was almost like they anticipated the light changing. We both hit each other at about 60 miles per hour. Immediately, I knew something was wrong with my body. I was slumped over to one side, and I couldn't move. The closest thing I could say to a prayer was, "God, help me." Control is taken out of your hands in a moment like that. We spend so much of our time trying to control life, and in that moment, I knew it was over. What happened next, it was out of my control. I grew up in the country, in East Texas, and I had a very free, wonderful childhood. I spent a lot of time in nature. My best friend and I would ride horses. We'd get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and these were great times in the summer. We would ride until it got too hot, around noon, and then we'd swim in lakes. We lived a life that was very much grounded in nature, and that part of my life was fantastic. The painful part of childhood was my mom. She was mentally ill, and there was a lot of emotional abuse, some physical abuse. I was isolated as an only child, so I retreated into books and studies. I saw college as my way out. That was my success route, there weren't any other routes. That was it. I wrote all these essays, and I got $20,000 worth of scholarships, just one essay competition after another. This was a big deal. Our mailbox, we grew up very poor, was practically falling over. The house was in shambles, and I thought, God, is the mailbox even going to be dependable to get these checks? I'd wait by the mailbox, and the checks started arriving. Then I knew, somehow, my life was going to change. There was a lot that depended on going to college. It meant a lot to me. I went to the University of Texas, and it's kind of a party school. At first, my grades were really great, but then they started declining. My senior year, I was depressed. I'd been through a bad breakup, and I knew my drinking and drug use was off the charts, really bad. I thought, I have to get my life together. I was having panic attacks about mortality. I was agnostic at that time, and I really did not think there was an afterlife. I studied English, so I read Walt Whitman, some spiritual writers, Emerson, Thoreau. I thought about what they said, and that was the closest I could get to spirituality. I thought, maybe I'll just blend with the grass, or maybe we continue on in some metaphysical way. But for the most part, I thought my identity, Trisha, my consciousness, would not continue. I would have moments where I thought, wow, we just die, and then I'm not going to be here anymore. This is all I have. What am I doing with my life? I'd really panic. I went to see a therapist. Emotionally, I was still dealing with some of the abuse from childhood. The therapist suggested that I run, because that was something I loved in high school. I ran cross-country, and running was my symbol. If I ran hard enough, if I ran fast enough, maybe I could outrun my demons, maybe I could be super healthy, super strong. I was running 9-10 miles a day, training for the Austin 10K. The night before I ran that race, I started having nightmares. I don't talk about them too often, because it seems like time is already out of sync, but I felt something coming for me. I was really tired, and I skipped coffee. I always need coffee. As I blew through the first light, it was yellow. The second one I looked up was red, but I didn't understand why a car was coming so fast. It was almost like they anticipated the light changing, knew that it would change. We both hit each other at about 60 miles per hour. Immediately, I knew something was wrong with my body. I was slumped over to one side, and I couldn't reach my driver's license, my insurance forms. I couldn't move, basically. I knew something was terribly, terribly wrong. Eventually, a good Samaritan stopped. She was a nurse, and she stayed with me, held my hand. She was beautiful. I'll never forget the kindness of her. She helped me until the ambulance arrived, and they put me on a board. The closest thing I could say to a prayer was, "God, help me." In that moment, control is taken out of your hands. We spend so much of our time trying to control life, and in that moment, I knew it was over. Everything depended on the surgeons. What happened next, it was out of my control. For the most part, all I had was my voice, the one thing that might be able to help me along this way. I never thought about having health insurance. I was a college student, and I just thought, I'll get a good job out of college. I'm young, I'm healthy, that won't be a factor. They took me to a downtown hospital, because I had internal injuries. They did lots of CAT scans. They knew that my back was broken in several places. I was in shock. I'd never known anyone to recover from back surgery. I didn't know if I'd walk. I was trying to get specifics from nurses. I was trying to get pain meds too, because it was painful. They refused. They said, until a neurosurgeon signs off on this, and says we're taking you in with the risk, we cannot give you painkillers. I was strapped down to a board for hours before I went into surgery. Family members were coming and going. I was really kind of a mess, psychologically, screaming at people at different times, crying. Then, eventually, the self-pity really took over. A nurse said that a neurosurgeon was coming in to talk to me. She came in, and I looked at her. I said, "I'm going to kill myself if I can't walk, so I need you to operate on me." She said, "Okay, I will, but I've been on duty for 40 hours, so I have to go home. I have to take a nap, and I must eat something. Then, I'm coming right back here, and I'm operating on you." There was such relief, because someone had passed. I'd overheard the conversation. There was a neurosurgeon who didn't want to come in, because I didn't have health insurance. I remember thinking, oh my God, I'm being thrown away. I'm trying so hard, and here, I'm just nothing, just a body on this stretcher. All of that was the physical world, so my brain was totally in that moment of the physical. I was worried about classes, worried about walking, really wasn't worried about death. Even when they wheeled me in, and it said 77% chance of death, I didn't even stop to ask. I thought, well, that's kind of a high chance, but I'll go with it, because I want to walk. They wheeled me in, and Dr. Flaw was the doctor's name. She squeezed my hand, and that's the last thing I remember, until I popped out of my body. The minute I popped out, I was in the corner of the room, looking down at the surgeons, looking down at my body. When you're outside of your body, you don't see with normal eyes. You kind of see with this 360-degree vision, and you can zoom in on something, or you can see behind you, but it's not that important. You're mainly looking at what you're looking at. I remember the tops of the surgeons' heads, their hands. I remember that there was a song on the radio, actually an Elvis song on the radio. It was the easy listening station, so I thought, I know this station. There was a lot of awareness of the room itself, of the surgeons. Then I thought, I'm alive. I live beyond this body. I was so excited. I wanted to tell my agnostic friends. In that moment, I thought, I can explain this to them. They will understand. Consciousness definitely goes on. It was a much longer time period than it took to actually communicate with them, but I thought that moment was profound enough, just looking at my body, looking at the surgeons. I was happy. There is no word that describes that happiness. It was relief, an absolute peace that we go on. I was convinced in that first moment, because my consciousness felt at ease. I always feel a little bit nervous in the body, and I think most people do, probably to some degree. There's some pain somewhere, some anxiety, or something going on. In that space, nothing. There was no pain, just peace. My intelligence seemed greater outside of the body, and I even thought about that, because these neurosurgeons had to be brilliant. Dr. Fla had her assistant, and he was beside her. I remember looking at them, and then these light beings were behind them, about 9 feet tall. I called them light beings. I called them angels in my book, angels in the ore, because that makes sense to more people. All I knew was that they were intelligent. They could communicate telepathically, and they were there to send healing through the neurosurgeons and into my body. They assured me I'd walk, that I would run again, even, and that everything would be fine. They almost said, playfully, "Watch this." When they said, "Watch this," they shot all this energy and light through the neurosurgeons, and it lit up my entire spine. I remember thinking, that's fantastic. The neurosurgeons have to know angels work through them. I'm going to ask them about this later. This is amazing. They're so intelligent, they have to know there's even a higher intelligence working with them. That moment stood out in my mind, but then the monitor flatlined. In that moment, I thought, oh, I'm technically dead. I didn't really want to watch. Do they have to flip me over? What are they going to do? How are they going to revive me? Years later, I found that I had internal bleeding, and I was bleeding to death. They started cauterizing veins, trying to stop the bleeding, and giving me blood transfusions. That's what brought me back, but I left. When you're in spirit form, you can just move through walls. I moved through the first wall, then a couple more walls, and I was watching my stepdad get a candy bar out of the machine. This was my verifiable detail to me. It didn't mean anything other than I thought he was a health nut, so the candy bar was funny to me. I thought, oh, he has a secret sugar addiction. I know it. I chuckled, and kind of moved into this space above Austin, which was the night sky. I floated there for a while, and the freedom felt great. I wasn't afraid. I just felt free and happy, even though I was told I'd return to the body. I thought, I'm pretty far away now. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm going to stay here. If I stayed here, would this be okay? It was totally fine if I stayed there to me, because outside of the body, I felt as if I was supported by a greater consciousness. Like Dr. Eben Alexander and others say, the brain is a limiter of consciousness. It limits what we experience, what we see. Outside of the body, we see more. I just knew, in those first few moments, that this experience does not compare to being in the body. One of my other initial thoughts was, oh, this is theater. All that we're doing is we're acting, we're learning things, we're putting on these bodies, these costumes. It didn't feel real. That felt like the reality, kind of like behind the curtain. I thought, oh, now I understand. We just come here. A lot of people talk about reincarnation. That makes total sense to me now. At that time, I didn't really think about it. I was just looking at the specifics of that life, realizing this life, that we go on. I also felt the energy of everyone I'd ever known, and wanted to tell everyone, basically, I love you, be better, be happy, enjoy your life. That's the message of the soul, not anything negative. It's just, hey, go love your life. The Hubble telescope images, there's a couple of them that I swear are very similar to what I saw, the pink expanse of stars, light. I was floating somewhere I didn't recognize, but I knew I was in the stars. I also felt this greater intelligence coming toward me, in the form of light. It was almost like the telepathy from the angel's eyes. It came towards me, and told me different messages, like, love is all that matters. It's all that you take with you when you leave this place. Be like a little child. Remind them to go to nature. All of these seemed like crystallized, simple messages, but there were about 5 or 6 messages like that. They were implanted deep within me, and I knew I would never forget them. That was just meant to be something I took back. Then, I was shown a portion of my life. I saw some of my childhood, where I played in nature, moments where I had faith. These moments were good. The light seemed to say, hey, your faith was beautiful. Your love for animals was beautiful. Just remember the good parts of life. The things that were not good melted away, almost like shadow just falls away. It was almost like, well, that's not what I'm taking with me. Almost as if that message, love is all that we take with us, we don't hold on to the negative in this place of light. I saw the life review, some places where I could be better. I was a little bit cliquish and judgmental. I was proud of myself for getting into UT, and I kind of looked down on people who didn't go to college. At different jobs where I worked, I looked at people who worked full-time as wait staff, and I wasn't rude to them, but I didn't give them room to get to know me. I saw how kind they were. I saw that they went home, this one couple, and they prayed about me. I almost want to cry when I think about it, because they saw that I was this depressed person, and they cared. I didn't even give them the time of day, because I didn't like what they wore. It's just so ridiculous. In that moment, I thought, I can do better. I can be a better person. I'm not leaving room for the beauty of who people are. That was the main focus of how I was going to change, as if the Creator, Source, wanted me to look at the beauty in people, their heart. It's almost like our soul knows how to be, but we forget in our culture. We forget, based on trying to feel special, trying to feel good about ourselves. As I finished that life review, I ended up in this place. It was full of greenery and beautiful grass. There was no death. Some people might call it heaven. To me, it looked like a consciousness that I was participating with. My grandfather appeared, and he wanted to recreate something from my childhood, because he knew I liked riding in the back of his pickup truck. My grandfather, he looked different. He looked young and handsome, and he glowed, almost like the angels, with this light. There was no death in him. I had seen him die. I was the last person he saw, and he had leukemia, was in his 70s, and did not look the way he looked there. He was the only person who had a connection to me who had passed. We spent time together, and then, at some point, he said, "Do you want to continue on?" Even though I was in the back of this pickup truck, driving very slowly through this beautiful green grass, I looked up, and I knew what he meant. There was more to this experience, and God was on the other side of this. I just shot out of the pickup truck, and I was this soul, just flying towards God. I felt great. I felt like every bit of insecurity floated away. I just felt so loved. I thought, this is the greatest place I've ever experienced. Why does anyone ever leave it? I want to get closer to this God, Source, this vibration, this unconditional love. I just felt safe, held in love. Then, at some point, there was this energy wall that kind of stopped me. I couldn't go any farther, and it vibrated through me, and said, "Look down." I looked down, and there was this river. There were many people who were walking on it, some were covered in shadows, some had light. I saw that if they had light, they were connected to God. From that place, it just looked like fear or love. There was only a choice between fear or love. I thought, oh, that's simple. I just go back and tell some people not to fear things, to love more. I thought, okay, I can do that. But God was like, no, you're going to be a teacher, and you're going to do that. I thought, well, I can't do that, because that's not what I want to do. I want to make money. I grew up extremely poor, and so I had planned to go to law school at UT. UT has a great law school, and I had friends who were in the law school. I thought I'd travel, see Europe, do some fun things. Eventually, I'd already taken the LSAT, and I'd prepared for law school. I thought, just given my skills set with writing, okay, I can do this. I can be a lawyer. The idea of teaching or nursing, those were like traditional careers for women. I considered myself somewhat of a feminist, so I thought, I don't want to do something traditional and low-paying. No, thank you. This is not for me. God was like, no, you're really going to be a teacher. That was it. That's the last thing I heard in the presence of God. I joked that I wanted to argue more, and there were thoughts that I was having, but it was as if God made me into this ball of energy, and I was thrown back through darkness towards my body. I ended up in the ICU room, where they give you ice chips, ask you to tell your name. I still was holding on to that experience. My first thoughts, even coming out of anesthesia, were, I just had one of those things they call near-death experiences, because I'd read about it. I thought, okay, I had one of those. Then, my energy didn't feel fully in my body. I felt like I was a part of the room. The nurse was asking me what my name was, and I literally didn't feel like me yet. I said, well, her name is Tricia. She said, no, your name. I thought, oh, my name. Then, I felt a little sad, actually, to come back to the specificness of being me, because I don't know how to describe it, but you're one with everything, yet you're also an individual in that space. To come back to the body holds trauma, the body holds memory, the body will die here. But in that space, you're eternal, you're free, and it's so beautiful. There was already a dislike of being in the body. I felt like I'd been in this beautiful, light-filled, expansive place, and it felt very limiting to come into the body. It felt as if I was being forced back into the body, that it wasn't a choice. Because if I had my way, I would have stayed there. This was definitely not my choice. I was sent back, and told I had a particular mission. I'm happy for the mission now, but in that moment, I was not happy. I was in ICU, hooked up to machines for 3 days. As soon as I could move my arms and talk, my grandmother brought me a journal. I wrote down everything that I remembered about the angels, because I was afraid I was getting morphine in the ER, and I was afraid this medicine might make the NDE go away. I thought, I have to remember this. I jotted down descriptions of the angels, about how they were not like paintings I'd seen. They were light beings, and they were so much larger, so much more intense. I tried to hang on to as much as I could. I was asking nurses, I'd grab their arms, do you believe in God? They'd say, yes, I believe in God. I go to church. I'd say, God is this big ball of light. They'd say, okay, we've heard enough from you today. I knew people were having these reactions, like, alright, you can stop talking now. Even my surgeon, I did ask her. I said, how long did I die? She said, you died for about 2.5 minutes. This is really early on, but you got several blood transfusions. You're going to be okay. I wanted to ask her more about what I saw, and I could just see, I could read energy, and that was not something I'd seen before. I couldn't necessarily read people's body language and imagery, but I saw her step back. I saw her have this thought, do not keep talking about this. I do not want to have to deal with this. I knew that she thought I was crazy if I kept talking about it, so I thought, darn, I don't get to ask her. That disappointed me, because I very much wanted to ask her if she knew that she was assisted by angels. But I was different from the beginning. I started seeing people differently. I started seeing manipulation, insecurity, all kinds of things in my family around me. I wanted to help them, honestly. There were these moments I reached out to my mom, and tried to tell her about my experience. The only person in my family who was receptive was my grandmother. She said to my mom at one point, "Let her talk, it's okay. This is interesting. This is her experience." She was tolerant. My mother rolled her eyes, and said, "How could she possibly know anything about God?" I remember thinking, oh, this is going to be harder to break through to her than I realized. I kept trying. There was a moment when we were finally alone, and I said, "Mom, I died." Her first question was, "Did you see Jesus?" I said, "Well, no." I could see her tense up. That wasn't a good answer. I said, "But what I experienced was amazing. It's changed me. I do believe in God now, so this is a positive. Can we start there? I know that we go on." I wanted to communicate to her that she was just as loved as I am. I said, "Look, you're wrong, and I'm wrong, but we're both loved. Isn't that great?" I could see in her face that she was thinking, "I'm not wrong, you're wrong." I thought, oh, this isn't meant to be a fight. This is meant to be good news, that we have so much more love than we can imagine. So, slowly, I started shutting down, realizing I couldn't just tell everyone this experience. A lot of NDEers have to be thrown right back into life, and I was lucky. I had a long recovery, 9 months. I was in a body cast, and I stayed at my mom and stepdad's house. They would get me books from the library, so I was reading Carlos Castaneda, Marianne Williamson, Deepak Chopra. I was just delving into spiritual material. I was very much in touch with the physical process of healing. It was amazing how 9 days in a hospital bed, I was in the best shape of my life, running 9 miles a day, about to run this race. I couldn't even stand on my toes after that. The body was just so weak, every part of me felt like I was on fire. My whole spine felt like there was a poker that was just in it. Yet, it got easier, week by week, and there was improvement. Eventually, I could walk. It was the heat of summer, so I had to do this really early in the morning, or really late at night. Early morning, there were lots of elderly people out, who saw this odd girl with a body cast on. They started asking me about my experience, and I got to know the neighbors. They were open. I found that people who were dying, or had a cancer scare, they loved my story. They were my biggest fans on the street. When I finally walked to the end of the street, they drank their coffee and clapped for me. They said, "You did it." It was like I had this cheerleader group of older folks in my parents' neighborhood. So, life was magical, even though it was painful. There were lots of discoveries. I learned how to lucid dream, and I participated with consciousness outside of my body. I was really in a beautiful state of quicker integration, because I had those 9 months to read, meditate, think. I was somewhat closed off before my near-death experience. The only way I opened up was if I had a few drinks, or was hanging out with friends, listening to music. I didn't really offer a lot of myself. I wasn't this boundaryless, full of love person. I kept myself a lot safer, because I distrusted people. I had a lot of barriers, I guess because of my childhood. I kept strong boundaries with people. But after my near-death experience, I loved everyone. I walked down the street, I was concerned about everyone. I just saw the light in every single human being. I was overflowing with love. I had this telepathy, where I understood what people were thinking and feeling. I loved animals. I was so happy that first year, I can't even describe it. The happiness and the freedom of being able to walk, of being able to explore this world, knowing that there is energy that comes from trees, that everything is conscious, that everything is beautiful. That just wasn't in my awareness. The only thing that was in my awareness before was me, just my thoughts, my head, and a lot of those thoughts weren't very good thoughts. That was another thing that I realized. All those negative thoughts that I had brought me down, and I didn't necessarily have to think them. That became a lifelong process of working with my own thinking, realizing what thoughts are my own, what thoughts are not, and how to live a happier life. I also went right back to school, and got my teaching certification. I went ahead and graduated, and went and taught immediately. The minute I was in the classroom, it was magical. I thought, what do I do? What am I going to tell these students? I just told them the truth. I said, I don't want to be a teacher. I know you don't want to be here, I don't either. But I was told to come here, and here's my story. They were like, mouths open, eyes wide. They said, I have a question. There was just a lot of communication, a lot of connection from the beginning. I find that people love these stories. It makes them think about what comes next, or the magical elements of life, or it puts them in touch with their own soul journey. I watched how different students wanted to become psychologists. They told me their goals, because they trusted me on some level. They were my first students, and that was the first class. There was so much magic, so much hilarity, so much silliness. It was truly fun, but also life-changing. It's so easy on the other side. There's just love, and there's just fear. But over here, sometimes people attack you because of fear. Sometimes people are manipulative because of fear, that they don't have enough, or they need something from you. It is devastating to people. But that fear, I see really as just a block to the light of God. That can be depression, that can be anything that blocks you from God. I think nature is a way for many people to heal. That's a way that many people could overcome a lot of things, is isolation, time in nature, thinking about your life, rethinking what you want to do, how you want to do it differently, reconnecting with some sort of light. Any moment your soul wakes up on this journey, and goes, I'm doing something good. I have a dream, I have a gift, or I have something to share, or something to help people with. Any time you wake up, and you're connected to something greater than yourself, then you're winning. I think we can all win, at different times in our lives. Maybe there's struggles, but we can still get to a point where we're giving to society, or we're really enjoying life, where we have a lot of joy in our life. We know that, to the best of our ability, we're giving love to the world. I know we all get frustrated in traffic, and technology, and all kinds of things. I'm not immune to it. I certainly have moments in life where I'm terribly frustrated. But shifting back into, okay, how do I enjoy this more? How do I remember that my energy affects other people, and how do I not affect them in negative ways? I hope that, on a quantum level, and on this oneness level, that more and more people are waking up to our connectedness. Because if we realize that we're all connected, that we're all one, we wouldn't want anyone to suffer. We would really make suffering in society the main focus. How do we ease suffering? How do we ease suffering in children's lives, the elderly, people without insurance, people who can't find a job, people who are disabled? How do we, just across the board, help people live better lives? I think a lot of near-death experiences are pointing towards, hey, there's a greater love on the other side that can help us live better lives. Let's do it.